Hi, this is Dave, and before we get to the show, I wanted to ask you a favor. One of our goals this year is to grow the show so that What Does Star Wars Mean to You reaches more listeners. And that's where we're asking you for help. And it's really easy. Wherever you listen to us, please hit that subscribe button. If you're liking the show, give us a 5-star rating and review on the platform you listen to us. We make a lot of fun of the algorithm and the smash that button thing, but it really does help us get noticed by new fans. And if you want to join in on the conversation, find us on social at Star Wars Mean to You. That's Star Wars Mean, the number 2 in the letter U. Now, let's chat some Star Wars.
I assume that had something to do with Star Wars. I remember one time I was at a con, I was like, what would I be without Star Wars? Like, would I be into sports? Like, what would be happening with me? I have no idea.
Hello there, this is Dave, and I'm an original trilogy kid.
And this is Alora, I'm a prequel trilogy kid. And welcome to What Does Star Wars Mean to You, the show where we talk to all kinds of fans of Star Wars to take the hate out of the debate and to look at the franchise from a certain point of view, one fan at a time.
Our guest today has worked as a lawyer, a journalist, a disc jockey, and an awfully poor waitress. She's also a dog lover and an extremely amateur photographer. But she's best known as a best-selling author whose works include the Mr. Darcy and Miss Tilney mysteries, including The Perils of Lady Catherine de Bourgh, and her upcoming The Rushworth Family Plot, as well as the writer of multiple young adult novels such as the Evernight series and the Firebird trilogy. But it's her work from that far, far away galaxy that brings her here today. She is one of the architects of the High Republic, as well as the author of several fan-favorite Star Wars novels, including Master and Apprentice, Lost Stars, Leia, Princess of Alderaan, and Bloodlines. Please give a warm hello there to Claudia Gray.
Hello there!
Hello!
Hello.
Tell us, Claudia, are you ready to share with the world what does Star Wars mean to you?
I feel like I have been sharing this to some extent for a while now, but I'm pretty much always ready to talk about Star Wars, or for that matter, pretty much anything nerdy at any given time. I am authentically of the tribe, as you will find out if you ask me, for instance, about the Penguin or Arcane or many other things I've been enjoying lately. But we're here for Star Wars.
But we're here for Star Wars.
That's our favorite answer around here. We love to kick off with our 5 with the Force. This is our 5 questions, kind of more rapid fire to get the Star Wars baseline. What Star Wars movie is your go-to favorite?
I mean, I think it's always going to be Empire, because that was so hugely formative for me. That came out the summer I turned 10. And, and it really enlarged that universe so much more and made it clear how much depth there was and how deep a dive you could really have. I'm going to give an honorable mention to Rogue One just because my extreme love of Andor has... I loved the movie when it came out, but now with Andor, which I have watched more than 20 times, and I'm not kidding about this at all, now I see so many other things in it as well, which is terrific.
The audience can't see, but I'm furiously nodding because I agree with all of that.
Yeah, I mean, I can just warn you right now, at some point, this is all going to derail into me talking about an Andor, which is the way about... I would say 75% of my conversations have gone since fall 2022. So just be aware.
So excited for season 2, are you?
Oh my God, I can't even stand it. We are ready. We are ready in the house.
Dave, would you roll a d6 for me?
Yes, I got a 1.
Ooh, who is your favorite major character?
I mean, I think I pretty much have to say Leia.
Mm-hmm.
She came along in an era when we did not have as many heroines.
Yeah.
And certainly, even to this day, there have been few that are like that feisty and that funny and that absolutely believable. And that was really, really important for me growing up and set a big template for me.
I don't think we've had anyone phrase Leia's impact quite like that she was all those things and you believed it, just so succinctly like that, dead on.
Just for cheese factor, the other day my husband and I were unwinding, we were pulling up shows remembered from when we were kids on YouTube, and all love to Linda Carter, the old Wonder Woman I loved it as a little kid, but
Yes.
it undercuts in so many ways
Yep.
how powerful and how awesome she's supposed to be. As a little kid, it still came through for me, but the show's actively working against her in a lot of ways. And there's nothing like that for Leia in A New Hope. She's the damsel in distress until the minute they get her out of that cell, and then it's over. She's in charge here.
Even while she's lounging in the cell when Luke first opens the door, you get the sense that she's not bothered by it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she's in control of the situation.
She has to be in like massive traumatic shock, but she keeps her bearings. She's been brought up to do that, through royalty, and at this point, she already has years of experience with the rebellion. She's keeping her wits about her.
I love that. Do you have a favorite line to quote?
Oh gosh, there are a lot. It sort of depends on the moment.
Yes.
I will say the one that I've quoted the most in the last couple of years, both because one, Andor, and two, there've been a lot of political things about, but there's a whole lot of wisdom in the line, power doesn't panic.
Ooh,
yes.
I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Wow. Oh my God. Right out the gate. So strong. Okay. Besides the films, what is your favorite Star Wars content? This could be anything from it's Andor. Perfect.
Yeah. That's right.
I wondered.
That don't have to consider, which is weird because there are many, many, many things that I have loved over the years. I love Knights of the Old Republic. I love a lot of things. I mean, honestly, I was playing with one story idea one time. I don't even know if this will be a book or not. So I don't even know if this will be a question that I get to use or not. But I'm like, can I use that Force Witch Night Sister from Ewok's Battle for Endor? Can I use her?
Yes.
I don't even know if I get to write that project or if anybody will be writing that project. Will say yes, but there's a non-zero chance. Andor, I absolutely adore. There's a lot of the Clone Wars that I think is amazing. Obviously, I think Charles Soule's comics the Darth Vader comic in particular, really established a lot of significant lore that I think we're going to see play out in broader and broader contexts over the next years. I think the full influence of that has only begun to be felt.
Wow. That's so exciting.
And what a way to sound like the Emperor when you say that. I think
power doesn't panic, Dave.
Okay. Yeah, you're right.
And let me preface that by saying this is me talking as a fan. It's not like I have information because the 90% of why I left, what was then Twitter was like, I couldn't say anything like, wouldn't it be cool to see something? And then all of a sudden 8 websites would have stories that say, Lucasfilm source confirmed.
Oh, no.
I could not say enough. Like, they don't tell me anything, people.
You also, you couldn't be excited as a fan because of that.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And in a lot of ways it makes sense. I don't get to play in this area, on a level playing ground anymore. It looks like I have way more whatever than I actually possess, but in these things perception matters. So I just had to accept that I will just geek out about all this with my friends and my husband, who luckily is just as big a geek as I am. So
perfect. Well, our last of the 5 with the Force, we'd like to tailor this to each guest. Who is your favorite character to write?
Ooh, in all honesty, I can't say that there's one single character that is my favorite because it's really like who has been easy to write that day. They're my favorite. I will say the one that I was the gladdest I got to delve into, like, I don't know if that was the most fun to write, but the one I was gladdest I got to delve into was Queen Brea of Alderaan in Leia, Princess of Alderaan, because this character who occupied a very significant position in the story, personally, politically, whatever, not in the old EU legends, nor in the new canon had anybody touched on her beyond her existence and a shot of her holding a baby. And I was like, that's bonkers. So the fact I got to work with her and, establish the role that she was playing and what she knew and how, both her individual influence with Leia and also who she and Bail were together as parents. Like, that was really great to dig into. And more than 40 years after something comes out, you don't expect any part of canon that significant to still be fresh territory, but it was.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot of, like, the Star Wars, I hope I don't phrase this in a poor manner, but the Star Wars universe has been picked over so much that it is kind of shocking that there are characters still out there, and still also, like you alluded to with the comic books and the novels, is that there's more characters being created to discover too. That is just kind of blows my mind. Like, every cast member of Rogue One could have a rich and full history in just
if Tony
10
Gilroy
years.
does it, I'll be there. Like, you can you can bring me 3 seasons about, that dude that was driving the transport on Wobani. Bring it. Tony Gilroy writes it, bring it.
1,000%.
That's so great. So, kind of our first question with everyone here is, what was your introduction to Star Wars, and can you take us through that experience?
Well, I turned 7 the year that it came out.
A sweet age.
So, my joke that I always make is that is the perfect age to have your relationship to reality just severed beyond any repair. And it was huge. And I think people, like younger people who came post monoculture, by the monoculture, I'm talking about when you had 3 TV networks, there were certain magazines that were hugely influential, and movies were in theaters and there was no way even to view them at home, until they came on television. The monoculture, like things that were considered obscure in the monoculture, were bigger than all but the biggest hits today. Like the guy who was like the 5th banana on WKRP in Cincinnati probably could not walk down the street without getting mobbed. Whereas I think a very small fraction of people would recognize like any given person who wins an Emmy in any given year.
Yes.
It's just not that. And Star Wars dominated the monoculture for years and years. It was so huge and everybody loved it. Everybody related to it. It was a happening. Like, people understood that the response to this movie was different than the responses to other movies. Spielberg had essentially invented the summer blockbuster 2 years prior with Jaws.
Right.
And people knew that was a thing, like, oh, now there are going to be these big summer movies. But Star Wars was immediately and obviously in just some other category. It was huge. And I grew up, reading all of that, watching all of that, playing with toys that had I preserved them would now make me rich, tearing up old copies of magazines to put in our trash compactor play set, so that they had junk to get out of. And we were the first generation. I'm sure we're not the only generation, but we were the first generation to discover that when the lightsabers fell out, the colored cocktail toothpick will serve.
Exactly. I didn't have the colored toothpicks, but I would take a Sharpie or like magic marker and paint a wood toothpick, yellow or red.
Nice.
Did you have any favorite toys growing up, or like a favorite Star Wars item?
I mean, we had a lot of things, and my brother and I were relatively close in age. We both loved it. So we'd both get toys. And at the time, we could remember very accurately whose was whose, but we played with them together, and made use of them, we had a Millennium Falcon, which was pretty great. We had
one of the best
Death
playsets.
Star, the little 3-story section. We had that.
With the elevator.
We had an X-Wing. But I did turn my closet into an X-Wing simulator. Which crayoned pictures of TIE fighters and bolts and stars and things, and I taped them up, and sat on the floor of my closet and pretended. So
That is the cutest thing I think I've ever heard on this show.
I will say not my very least favorite, but the thing that made me the maddest, and like through the decades, I reach back and accuse. I've brought it up to Lucasfilm executives, even though they're completely different people now. But I'm like, who made the Princess Leia doll just this much too big to wear Barbie clothes? I mean, she could wear one outfit. The people who made the Marie Osmond doll, because they had the Donnie and Marie dolls, they knew. They were like, no, fit her in the Barbie stuff so she can change clothes,
Yeah.
No, they made this doll just a little too big.
Wow.
And it rankles, 40 whatever years. I think that was 1978.
Yeah,
I'm almost
that sounds
sure.
about right.
What is that? That's 46 years later. I continue to be annoyed.
Don't mess with girlhood.
Yes. Well, I want to jump into some of your writing and just in case there's spoilers, spoiler alert. I'm not sure if there will be or not. Now, one of the things I always like to ask authors is how do they approach writing these characters that are so familiar to so many people? Do you do anything to get their voices down, to figure out kind of like what mannerisms to use? And I'll say this now while we're here, but your depiction of Princess Leia is so fantastic, especially in Bloodline. It to me, I felt like I wasn't just hearing and feeling the character of Princess Leia. I felt like I was seeing the performance by Carrie Fisher as Princess Leia through your writing, and it charmed me and blew me away. And having just said all that,
how'd you do it?
How do you do that? What magic spell did you use on me?
Yeah,
you just heard my childhood story. The way I put it once was, I've spent my whole life asking myself what Princess Leia would do, and then finally somebody was like, "We will pay you money to do it," and I was like, "Thank you," because all I've done throughout my entire existence has been like, how would Princess Leia approach this? And also, especially like with those two novels, with Bloodline, it was looking at Princess Leia being just a few years older than I was at that time. And that was interesting to me because Star Wars, traditionally, it's better now, but still, not exactly awash with viewpoints of women over 40, it's not a deep bench there. And I thought that's really interesting to sort of be like, okay, she's, you have to preserve that sense of like the good versus evil, the richness and the epic quest of it. But at the same time, through the eyes of somebody who's like, well, okay, you won the war and it didn't fix every problem. And you got the love of your life and you still had to work on how that was going to work for the two of you, like the easier answers that you believe in a little more, I think, when you're younger. Even if I don't mean that that's like naive or stupid, it's not. It's just, I at this point I've been alive long enough to be like, oh, you've thought of every complication, have you? Guess what? Here's some more. Here's some more. But it was really interesting to be like, okay, how do I explore that and still leave her, this very, very determined, courageous fighter for the right and the just as she sees it. And she is, but she's also somebody who has learned to see things with some more nuance, to understand the limitations of what even somebody in her position can do.
Right.
And somebody who's still having to work. The whole point of the character Ransom Castrofo is, it's not about her compromising what is right, but it is about listening to somebody that would be very easy for her to assume is wrong.
Yes. And that relationship is also, it felt extremely present to today's kind of like political polar opposites. And I really liked how you were able to like give this guy who is at the beginning just obnoxiously dismiss, like you easily dismiss him as one thing, and he's really a kind of complex character with these kind of different viewpoints and understandings. And I don't know, it's such a fascinating story to be told in the Star Wars universe at this time, I think is what I'm saying.
I would love to write Ransom Caps Truffaut again someday. I don't know when or if I'll ever be able to do that, but I would love to.
Yeah, and I'd love to see where he's at, how he's grown or changed, or if he's gone more in the direction that he started in.
Yeah, I think in Bloodline you do see him like, you know, he's one of those people who's sort of like heritage, not hate. And for him that is true.
Yes.
But over the course of the book, he has to be like, who am I spending time with? Who am I encouraging? You know, just because I am able to separate these things does not mean everybody around me separates these things. So yeah, it would be interesting to touch base with him again.
Yeah.
Wow.
Another aspect, the characters are one thing, but writing like theatrical, cinematic action scenes that feel like they're from the storyboards of a Star Wars movie. Is there a way you approach that to kind of really flesh it out and give it that feeling of like you're hearing the John Williams music and seeing the action, even though there are words on a page? Was that a convoluted way of phrasing that?
I'm glad that you feel it goes that way. Action scenes are always tough. I don't know why, and that's true in everything, not just Star Wars. But I do try to include a couple of scenes or moments or descriptions, and not just in the action scenes, but like things that would be right after the white screen.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yes.
there's the ship over the planet. You know, there's this, there's that. Like I think if you just create a few images like that, the reader and their knowledge of the cinematic language of Star Wars fills in the rest.
Yeah.
You know, you just kind of need to get a couple of images up there, you know, a couple of moments that are both visually arresting, but, you know, emotionally affecting. Once you get a couple of those in, then I feel like the readers make the rest happen.
Yeah.
No, that was my experience with Lost Stars for sure. Was like, I was like, oh, I can see that. And then I was just like, and it was just like page turning so quickly. Yeah.
So you've written Star Wars in the prequel era with Master and Apprentice, the High Republic era, as well as post-Return of the Jedi era. Do you have a favorite era that you like to write in or explore in? And what era would you love to take on next?
Ooh.
Honestly, I don't have one favorite. I mean, my favorite thing is that I am able to go into the different time periods.
Yeah.
You know, I like being able to leap around some. You know, I've finished my final book for the High Republic at this point, and as great as that experience has been and as much fun as I've had, I'm like, I am ready to visit a different corner of that galaxy now. You know, I like the variety. I like checking it out at different points, which is fun. The number one thing that I would like to write, and I would like to write pretty much everything whenever they're ready to have post-sequel trilogy stuff. I'm here. But the number one thing I want to write is if they do novels based on Knights of the Old Republic.
Yes.
You know, I've explained to them that if there is to be a young adult novel that's the backstory of Mission and Zalbar, and I don't write it, like there will be blood. There will be.
Good for you. Oh my god. Sorry,
you hear that, Lucasfilm CEOs?
Because I know you're listening.
I have said this to people with more authority than I should say it.
I have a maybe unfair question. In your own headcanon, just because we're talking about the sequel era, where do you think Thane and Ciena are in the sequel era of Star Wars?
Let's put it this way. I think they probably are not in the Resistance. Yeah. I don't think they're, you know, pro First Order by any means.
Sure.
But I have the sense of them as people who feel like I fought one war. And one thing also, and this is just in my head, of course, you know, but to me, like one of the little behind like sub themes of Lost Stars is what you see happening to Jellican over the years. It begins as this place with a very vibrant local culture, and then you see the Empire kind of just chiseling that down and wearing it away more and more over time. And I guess in my head, I would imagine that, they're alive and they're well, whatever, that they would be wanting to try to help rebuild Jellican.
Oh my gosh. I hope you get to write that story.
Yeah, which is, I would love to write that. I hope it will happen someday. I don't know. But, and there's going to be a lot of that going on. And I know that there have been some books and things that have touched on that, but there's so much rebuilding to do.
Yes.
And I think there, and that's, thousands and thousands of places over the galaxy. It's not just the one big fight anymore.
No.
All these different worlds where you have these individual struggles that will be happening. And, I think that involves as much effort and probably as much heroism in its way.
I love that because for me, that's where I have the most joy in diving into content that's not the, the canon films is in diving into the books is what's happening elsewhere. How first off, how did this happen? And then, what's the fallout from that? And how are these characters rebuilding? Like the human stories, even though they're alien, right? That's the heart of it all. Like that, I think, is why Star Wars has propelled in the way that it has, is because there's so much that you can explore. I would be first in line for that book. So thank you for answering that question.
From your lips to Lucasfilm Publishing's ears, I
Do you hear
still
me?
believe that day is going to come, but in all honesty, I thought it would be the 10th anniversary, and it's not. So, but maybe we'll see. Maybe someday.
I hope so.
I just think it's kind of beautifully perfect that that's what they do, because as soon as you started saying it, I was like, that's totally within their DNA to be like, hey, let's give back to our planet. We love this planet. Let's build it back up.
Yeah. And also, because of their status as people from very different parts of that culture, they're people who can really help build a bridge.
Right.
Yes. What is one of the things you added to Star Wars canon that you're most proud of?
Ooh.
Of what you're most proud?
I'm not the most proud of. I'll tell you the most self-indulgent thing.
Oh, that's great. I love that.
Perfect.
Yes.
We got to go to Galaxy's Edge, all of us together, the, people for the High Republic in the beginning. They took us all there, to take pictures of us on the Millennium Falcon and stuff. We're like, okay, I guess we'll go.
Twist our arms.
So we're having a really good time. Anyway, it was really, really hot. And at one point I was like, God, I wish I could get like some ice cream or something. And one of the people were, like the guide was like, oh, but there's no ice cream in Star Wars. And I was like, And as of Into the Dark, there certainly is ice cream in Star Wars called Baja. So I did that. That I'm not proud of that. I'm the opposite of proud of that. But if they ever try to give you that again at Galaxy's Edge, it's like no, we can have ice.
I've heard it from Claudia herself. Ice cream exists in Star Wars.
And again, this isn't the most proud of, but probably the single most exciting thing for me was when we went to Oga's Cantina. Nobody had told me that the wine from Alderaan, Tony Ray wine from Bloodline, is on the menu. And so I got really excited when I saw that because I didn't know it was there.
That's very cool.
That would be so, because it's one thing to create it, but to stumble upon it out in the wild as part of the world, that's just got to be a little bit I'd probably steal that menu. I would have walked out of Disney Park.
Super cool.
That's awesome.
That is awesome. So we'll get into the last couple of questions here.
Yeah.
What are the top 3 elements that make Star Wars to you?
Ooh. One is about feeling really rooted in that world. And as I've said many times, I feel like the 2 great world builders of the 20th century were Tolkien and Lucas.
Mm-hmm.
Even from A New Hope, that this is a place that has a history. It feels authentic and lived in.
Yes.
You know, and I think you have to have that sense of it. Like, I remember when I was working on Lost Stars, you know, I had one of my beta readers looking at something, and I mentioned Thane going to his family's hangar. And she's like, nobody has a hangar. You have to have, like, you know, the FAA and this and that. And I was like,
Yeah.
no. In our world, yes, but this is a
Yeah.
world where everybody owns vehicles that fly. People would have hangars. It would be like having a garage. You know, like, you have to adapt your thinking to this. You know,
Yes.
and try and live in that way. And I will say that's actually a thing I enjoyed a lot about the first 2 episodes of Skeleton Crew, which I think is, you know, adorable and lively, and it's for kids, but it doesn't feel like they've dumbed down the universe, which is very, very difficult needle thread. So kudos to them. But like the Star Wars suburbs, I was like, I'm buying that. You know, you guys thought that out. I like it. So yeah, some real sense of that world and what it would be like to be in that world. 2, you do have to have some sense of light versus dark.
Yeah.
You know, it is a story of good versus evil. And again, like from Andor, we have learned you can put a lot of shades of gray in there and still preserve that.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know,
absolutely.
It does not have to mean dumbing something down. It does not have to mean making something simplistic or inadequate to the complexities of a difficult situation. I think that show did an amazing job of really showing like some real moral compromises involved in bringing rebellion to bear without losing that sense. You know, it kind of drives me. I'm going to say batty, which is funny because like, and now we're segging over into other fandoms now, but like, say Joker, the Joaquin Phoenix movie, the first one, versus the Batman with Robert Pattinson. Matt Reeves is the Batman, which I nearly didn't see, and now I'm like, what that movie is so great. And like both of these movies took a slightly revisionist take on Thomas Wayne versus father. And the Joker, I felt like it was just so ham-handed, like, oh, actually, he's bad. He's just bad, you know, and that was all it did. Whereas in the Batman, Matt Reeves had like, Thomas Wayne was a good man who could get caught up in emotions and could forge the wrong alliance or could panic, you know, like, and I'm like, that is to me much more intelligent revisionism, or not revisionism isn't what I want. It's a much more intelligent way to nuance things. And I don't like it when people are just like, well, they flip it. Oh, they're just as bad. You know, I feel like most of the time that feels pretty hollow to me, or at any rate, it's almost always pretty easy. Whereas what they did in Andor, you know, that's more complicated, and it demonstrates you can do this in Star Wars without losing that core thing. And beyond that, it has to have, even in the more serious stuff, it has to have a sense of fun. You know, the Angry Brigade online, one of the many, 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 many things they chose to be angry about was the existence of Geode in the High Republic, because he's a comic character. We're supposed to take this seriously. It's like, pretty obviously, no. You know, you know, but you know, it's like Chewbacca does a Tarzan yell in Revenge. Like it's meant to be a little bit funny, you know. One of my few critiques of Andor is they could have had a little more of that, but they still do have some, you know. It's just more sort of sly observational humor than, you know, straightforward. But we're meant to be having fun here. You know, even when it's sad, even when it's this, like, there should be some sense of this enjoyment.
Absolutely.
I was just about to say joy.
You
joy
can have
of
something
being on
be
this
gritty.
adventure.
You can have something be dark, but you can't have like the kind of thing that we call hard to watch. You know, But anyway, that's what I would say.
I don't want to see Star Wars crossed with, I can't think of the horror movie now, but like Hostel or
No, I
Yeah.
don't want to see that. No.
like,
No.
I forget the one with the, God, never mind. Moving on.
Well, I was gonna say too, like Star Wars, I think another reason why it resonates still so much today is like it's constantly touching on themes that are applicable to our world and the things that we should be thinking about. And you need a bit of a spoonful of sugar for that to go down and to be receptive. And like and you I think at its core it was always supposed to be fun. So I love that. Yeah.
And it is escapist. You know,
Exactly.
even at its grittiest, it is escapist. And
Yes.
stopping to acknowledge this element of fun is one of the things that makes it escapism.
So our final question. We've talked about you experiencing Star Wars back in the 70s when you were at the perfect age to do it. At age 10, experiencing the darker Empire Strikes Back and uncoupling from reality. And then all your just wonderful stories, your ability to capture on the page what is on the film. After talking through all of this, can you tell us what does Star Wars mean to you?
It's one of those things, it's very difficult to have an answer for that because it has literally been such a huge part of my life. You know, it was so foundational to my imagination as a very young person. You know, I've always been interested in science fiction and fantasy and, you know, different things. And I assume that had something to do with Star Wars. I remember one time I was at a con, I was like, what would I be without Star Wars? Like, would I be into sports? Like, what would be happening with me? I have no idea. You know, and then, of course, now it's been a part of my professional life for a decade. And it's been a very transformative element of my professional life.
Yeah.
So, you know, there really isn't anything else in my life that I can easily compare that to. It's been a huge influence in so many ways. I guess the best way I can say is that I'm grateful for that influence. You know, I'm grateful for everything that this has brought into my life, you know, whether that was attempting desperately to alter Barbie clothes to fit Princess Leia, which didn't work at all, you know, or I don't know if you see my Instagram, but if you go back a few posts, people out there, you'll find since we just moved, you know how things turn up when you move that you haven't seen and you don't know when.
Oh, yeah.
I found my original copy of the novelization of Return of the Jedi.
Oh, yeah.
And I had cut out, there were several blank pages in the back for whatever reason. So I'd cut out from magazines and newspapers pictures of the characters, scotch taped them down and wrote little captions like a photo section. And that was my first Star Wars writing, you know, and
that's
many
incredible.
of them are misspelled, you know, but you know, and somebody online pointed out that I had identified Wicket as Tebow, and I was like, do not dispute little me in this matter. You know, I described him as most hostile of the Ewoks, so sorry about that, Tebow.
It's canon now.
Yeah, but both the joy I had doing it and the incredible joy I had finding it again and seeing that, you know, that is a delightful thing.
Thank you for sharing that with us. Yeah.
Yes, that is amazing.
And all of this with us.
Thanks for coming on and joining us, Claudia. Where can people find you? And can you tell us a little bit about your book that's just about to come out?
Let's see. Well, my suggestion would be to go to my website, which is about to get updated, but will still be www.claudiagray.com. That is Gray with an A. And it has links to all my social media. I don't do much on social media myself anymore. It's a gift I gave myself. And when I encourage people to try,
it's a good gift.
Yeah. I'm one of the 14 people still on Tumblr. And I put things up on Instagram, but that and etc. But, I have those things updated with release dates, etc. There's a way you can subscribe to my newsletter, so you'll get updates that way. I will be going out and doing some events. Just did my first European event since moving here a couple weeks ago with in Vienna, Austria, which was wonderful.
Beautiful.
And
Vienna.
Vienna. Yeah, it was snowing a little bit. And I have to say, kudos to Austria. They're like, no one should have to walk more than a quarter of a mile without having a place to get hot chocolate. They're just a station. Like, get your hot chocolate. It's like, I salute you, Austria, for this understanding.
That's awesome.
And I'm going to be coming back to the U.S. and doing some event, and in Canada, doing a few events early next year. I believe I'll be in Vancouver.
Oh, nice. That's right in our neighborhood.
Yeah, I'll be in Cleveland, Ohio at one point.
Wow.
I will be in, I think it's Fan Expo Vancouver that I'm doing. Yeah, please come by. And a couple events in March in Florida, the names of which I cannot currently recall, but it will be on the newsletter and it will be on the social media.
Yes.
So you can find me there. My next books will be Star Wars, The High Republic, Into the Light, the penultimate book of the whole shebang, which is coming out in April. And then my fourth mystery book, The Rushworth Family Plot, will follow it in June.
Oh, wow.
Fabulous.
Excellent.
Lots to be excited for in 2025.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And links for Claudia's website will be in the show notes as well as some links to your Instagram.
All right.
Claudia, again, thank you so much for joining us. It was really a pleasure. We're both big fans.
You couldn't tell.
Yes. And so thank you so much for joining us. And if you ever need a beta reader, I'm not exactly sure what they do, but you can send it to us. We'll be quiet about it, and we'll give you.
I'm afraid what happens is like the ceiling opens up and Lucasfilm lawyers on tables down into the room with trank darts is pretty much what happens. But I actually don't know exactly what my next project for Star Wars will be. I know there will be at least one, but when and what is still TBD. But I'm not done with the galaxy far, far away.
Well,
that's awesome.
Is the best possible.
So glad to hear.
For us.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for having me. This has been really fun.
Yeah. No, may the force be with you. Thank you, Claudia, so much.
All right. May the force be with you always.